When you're thinking about an idea, how important is it for you to think about the budget? Or are you not even entertaining that just yet?
I don't really entertain that when I'm trying to imagine a story or think about what I'm going to do in that sense. I try to let it be what it's going to be and then try to figure out how to do it. I think that's the only way to really do it, because if not, I think you can, and people do, and I'm around people who do it all the time, and we've done it, I've done it, where you have these certain amount of resources and you do it for that, and yes, you can reverse engineer and kind of put yourself into it. But I think that this type of exercise or this type of thought process where it's kind of coming more internally by being broken down to your taste has more potential to have a sustaining feeling that you can get from a project that will sustain you through making it. Whether you have to make it on your own or you are going to get 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or $100 million to make it. Because we know there's stories of all kinds of movies that have taken many, many years for producers to get done. So the most important thing is for them to be passionate about it and care about it and want to see it go all the way through, especially when we're talking through this type of process anyway.
Sure. Well, I don't know if we have a title for this yet, but I love the 2 cards that you've chosen. Maybe we could call it the Untitled Sean Reid Project. I don't know if you have a name for it, but
I think that the let's call it The Internal Butler as a working title. So
okay.
It's just being a Hollywood factory, we'll just call it The Internal Butler. So we don't want to say The Butler because there's already been a movie that's been The Butler. So we'll just say The Internal Butler, and we just know that it means the internal life of the butler, but we don't know really what that means yet.
Okay, love it. So in The Internal Butler, how much do you envision this movie would cost to make?
I would love to make this type of movie for $5 million. Because I'd like to be able to have the cast around it and the scope around it, but not too much, but just the scope of the storytelling to be able to have that vision. It doesn't have to be that huge. I mean, I don't see us hunting the dinosaur thing, and I don't see us doing the spy thing per se, but I do see, some adventures or some things where he had to save or help or rescue or bail out the family he was working for, in whatever way that is. Especially once he goes on his journey and decides to leave, this kind of insular family environment that he's discovered now that there's a secret that he actually does have. Maybe he has some money and maybe he is going to get it, or maybe there's more family somewhere, whatever it is. So he's going to start out on that journey carrying it. Maybe it's even just kind of like butlering for free. Just kind of helping people. You could turn it into like a, what is that? The TV series was, where it's just a wandering angel, right? Or Kung Fu. He's just a wandering person now who's trying to find through helping people who he's supposed to be. He's not a priest. He's not a Kung Fu guy. He's a butler. And even in that comedic part of it, it's still serious. Because people still need to learn how to especially if they're going to get a better job and they come from a lower strata, to have a butler in your house for a week, you'll learn how to dress properly so that you could show up for that. Because that butler could show up and get that job.
Sure.
You know what I mean? He could show you how to dress and tie your tie and get yourself together to be able to go and show up. If you've never learned how to tie a tie, never knew how to eat a proper meal, never know how to drink tea properly or whatever it was at the time, he would be able to show you those things.
Sure. What fork to use.
Manners get used a very long way still in society.
Sure.
Even today, oddly enough.
Well, they're often forgotten, but yeah.
Yes, they're often forgotten. But
anyway, that's a side
cultural
note.
graces are something that still can get you a lot further than not. Even just having a good tone on the phone can get you more than not.
Very true. And plus, if he's helping this family, who knows if it's a scandal, maybe it's in the paper, and he ends up sort of helping them through that. Anyway, I'm just...
There could be many, exactly. So there could be chapters of this thing. That's why I see it. That's why it's easily a BBC show to me. Like I see it as a because it's just so he's just going and wandering around and going, and each week he ends up or each season he's helping. You know, the first season he essentially you find out the deep dark family secret and he leaves. The next season he's now, you know, on his first town or wherever he's ended up, and maybe it's, you know, it's really like he's not even a butler anymore. He's, you know, so he's literally fallen out of his life, his comfort shell. And now what will he do? You know, is he a factory worker? Is he drinking too much? Has he tumbled so low that now he is not even that clean picture of that person who is organized and can do that? You know, you have all these things that can be happening to someone who loses that protective downtime Abbey-ish shell. Right?
Sure.
But you know, I'm making it Beverly. I don't know what era I'm going to make this, but I'm kind of leaning towards when it's good.
Right. Kind of like when people leave the corporate space, you know, they can also change because now their schedule changes. Now they're not seen by their title, so kind of loses part of his identity, maybe.
Yeah, he loses a lot of it. So
You had said $5 million, possibly. How did you come up with that budget? Or just, I know it's just on the spot.
It's based on several things. It is based on the level of talent I would like to have. So if I take that and I go, okay, I'm going to I'd want to shoot for 4 weeks at that level. I would want mainly to shoot on possibly in a studio. I would need some physical effects. So I'm thinking 2.5 towards casting, and I'm thinking 2.5 towards physical production. And then that's kind of how I end up deriving it by, usually in my brain.
And is much of the movie going to be him discovering himself, or will it be in his role as this butler with that identity?
I think it's going to be with him discovering himself through not having an identity to have that identity again, or whatever that is, or whatever he chooses to choose. So it's like, I think it's like, that's why I like the internal butler idea, because it's like, regardless of where he actually is, he's still butlering on some level, and that's something that he's trying to, you know, break out of. You know, that in some levels he needs to not be thinking so much about everybody else, but discover who exactly he is, and then if he decides he wants to do that, then he could do that. Many butlers get married and have family, but he's decided to be this, you know, diligent Anthony Hopkins-esque character, and I forget which one that was, but where he just kind of just goes his life just being dedicated to the life and never getting married or doing those types of things, and being the best butler they can possibly be, almost like they've got to be priests or something.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess it creates less complication to the family that hires them. You know, if they have no family, then there's less, you know, they don't have to worry about it. They're there, they can go away for a day or two, and then, you know, they come back and they're fine. Or
you also become almost part of the family when you work with,
absolutely,
you know, people that, even though you know where you stand, sort of, but you're drawn into some of the dilemmas and squabbles and things. Yeah,
absolutely, and obviously this type of character will be drawn into many of those.
Sure. Okay. And maybe he's a peacemaker a little bit, in a sense. Do you think this idea is ready to pitch to investors from all the wonderful things that you've said and these ideas you've fleshed out?
No.
Not yet.
No, not at all. There's no. I have no sense of who I would put in it, how that would actually generate or be worth that budget. I haven't had a chance to break down whether it'd be worth distribution-wise for that. You know, those types of movies. This movie is not probably unique enough, if it's a movie, to get theatrical, just based on what it is. So we would have to find a streaming service that would be looking for this type of thing, and are they really looking for this type of thing? So I'd vet it a lot more, and I'd probably look to have more of, if it's something I really wanted to do, I'd look to at least have, you know, a script, you know, even if it's a first draft on it, just because then I have a little bit more of, I can say this is mine type of thing, especially with what we've done, because we've taken, essentially, we've brainstormed anything that we could brainstorm right now, anybody else can. So the only reason that maybe somebody could be able to go in and pitch is because they have immediate availability to be able to do that, where I don't necessarily have to do that. I have to figure out who it's going to be and make a play and strategically get to that person, and it could take time, so I want to do it properly. Where someone else who's in that type of environment, they could come up with that on the, eating oatmeal tomorrow and go in and pitch that idea. So it's kind of understanding how big a pond we're in and how immediate it is for someone else to be able to do the same thing. So I would look to, how do I make it more mine? Maybe now it's because it's like, okay, well, there's been the Black Butler, but I am a Black filmmaker, so maybe it's still got to be a Black Butler. Maybe it's a Black Butler who's like that era of like right after the Jim Crowism era, and maybe that becomes, okay, so who is that? Maybe I could actually finance it through, doing, a grant through the PBA. There's a lot of different ways if we start to do it, certain things. So that's why I start to think about it as a development process then. How could I, get somebody to conceivably say yes to this movie?
Do you have an age range for the Butler?
It's definitely going to skew a little bit older. It's definitely the art, the art audience. I think it's definitely probably my age range, which is at, or the 34 to 45, 55, type of thing. Maybe you draw some of those really artsy millennials, but more than likely they may or may not be interested in that. I think they need a little bit more explosions or something. Not sure. But they may be. I mean, I like those types of movies that's what I was going to see Merchant Ivory movies at 22, 23 years old, but I was also going to go see Wim Wenders movies when they were opening at that period too. So I'd go see almost anything. If it was drawing me to see it, and I'd love to being able to in a theater by myself even then. So,
can you give us a little more of your vetting process? What would that entail?
In terms of something to be worthy of taking it in, or an idea, or a project. Ultimately, for me, a project, there's a few things that you have to check off. One of them is that, do you know what's wrong with the project? Or do you know what someone else is going to point out about the project? It's essentially being a good salesperson. Like, I want to knock down your objections. So if some people are going to have trouble with, the Butler didn't do so well and whatever, well, I'm going to make it for less money, and we're going to do it this way, and this is how we get around it. We're going to do this with the casting and open it up this way. Oh, okay. So just like the question, why should you make the project? That's usually the first thing. It's not a challenge. It's just that there are a lot of reasons why somebody should be making a project. But if you know exactly why you should be making a project, you convince that person very quickly that you should be making that project. So understanding, so it's like having a checklist and knocking off those objections and knowing for yourself, okay, am I committed to this script? Would I be willing to deal with this for the next 5, 10 years of my life? I've got a script I've been working on for that long. 5, 10 years of your life. So, and it's still working, and I'm still going to get that movie. And it's really like, even the script is like, I'm so futzy and Kuberdisc, that I want to develop and develop and develop, where I have friends who they write the first draft and they develop it a little bit more, and then they're ready to make it, and I'm just not that type of person, So as a filmmaker, as a director, as a producer, I can work with somebody who does it however they do things. That's kind of, I think, what's, especially if I'm a producer for hire. If I'm hired to produce for you, and and you're the director and you've already been picked, I don't really have a choice anyway, right? I can try to get you to do a shot list, but, you're already been hired. I can't really fire you. We're kind of stuck together. But, if I hired you, where I've had situations where I've hired the director, the client has hired me to hire everybody. So I've brought the director in, or even said, if you want, you could. I'm like, I don't think the client's going to take me. Do you know what I mean? I even told them, look, my reel's not good enough. Your client's not going to take me. But I have somebody I just work with. They'll take him. I guarantee it. And I know he'll work at my rate because I know he needs the money. So, you know, you figure it out and you do those types of things. And so there's all those different levels. So when you're vetting it, one of the big things is that who's attached to it already? If you're bringing me that project, what does that package look like already? I want a package where, to be perfectly honest at this point, it would take a lot for me to look at something that someone else is bringing me outside of my own circle. Mainly because it's just so much work and it's just so much, you know, personality, and it's just so much dealing with all of those different moving parts. And I've been a part of things where there was 100% that should have been made or should have gotten sold or shouldn't gotten. And because there were too many executive producers on the project, too many people who had influence on the project, there's no way it'll ever get made. And I was just a creative entity, and being told that breaks your heart, you know, but you go through that and so you see it. So why would I push anything that I already know is overloaded with too many people, right? So then the other thing is it attached to something else? Is it an original piece of property? Is it an IP that has, you know, is it a comic book? Is there something that has value? Well, I now have the reach where I have a lawyer where, yeah, I could vet something and I could get clearance, and I could figure it out, and I could make an offer. So that doesn't preclude me from doing something. Is it based on something historical like what I'm working on? That won't stop me because you got newspapers, you've got all these things. If it's a real historical event, there's all this information that you can create. You don't need the book necessarily. And is it something that I personally want to see? Do I want to see it? You know, and if I can't say I want to see it or I'm excited about it, then that would be the number one disqualifier, I would gather, for anybody.
I feel like I like this character already, and I want to see his journey. Do we have a name possibly for him?
No, we don't.
No
yeah.
name.
I'd
Okay.
have to, because we haven't decided on an era even, because I mean, and that's where the budget could go up. Like if we make it a historical piece and we go, like if, you know, when are Butler's really active, and are we making it in the United States? Are we making it, you know, are we going to the UK and making it? You know, so there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of factors there that, you know, can we make it all in a studio? And say it's like, you know, because they didn't make movies in Ireland until the Quiet Man, so they made a lot of movies about Ireland and Europe before that, and they were all shot in the United States. So, you know, we could do that. So there's a lot of things to consider, I think, on that. Like, or who would casting might dictate that as well.
Sure. I guess it could be a house manager here in LA. A lot of these people have house managers that arrange things and sort of run the place. So
yeah, I mean, it would be
modern
interesting to be, I mean, there are definitely, like, the 70s is still a doable, 70s, 80s, 90s is still very doable as a period piece. And definitely by the 70s, there were still people who were very rich enough, and especially in Beverly Hills and in different places, to have, you know, and stars and actors had butlers. And they certainly had them in New York. They had doormen, they had butlers, they had all of those things, especially Upper East Side individuals. And in Europe, they're still alive and kicking. So, you know, it's just really, I think, discovering what that sweet spot would be.